Taken in by a rogue shinobi and a gentle warrior, Naruto learns the art of shadows, and finds love in the unlikeliest of places. Chapter 1. Compared to other villages, one would never see the village hidden in the leaves as cruel. Quite the contrary, in comparison many would see the village as soft and weak, treating its ninja as people instead of tools and trying for peace instead of outright taking what they think they deserve. What many people don't know is how Konoha treats one of its own, specifically one Uzumaki Naruto, who could now be found running from yet another mob. One would think the villagers would be done for the day, seeing as a mob similar to the one now chasing the blonde through the streets had earlier beaten the poor 7-year-old to a pulp and then decided to parade his beaten body around the streets by tying him up and bodily dragging him, with a sign around his neck saying "Demon Scum." It seems they were going for an evening repeat now, though of course it wasn't the same villagers. No, the other villagers had been arrested. This was a brand new mob. This new mob was taking advantage of a major crime going on across town, which the Anbu usually assigned to guard the young Uzumaki were dealing with. Here is where our story starts. As to where the story goes from this point, we'll all have to see for ourselves. A young 7-year-old Naruto had seen better days, you could tell that just from a glance at him. Wearing a dirty, what used to be blue but had by now turned black from many nights of not being washed, torn shirt with cuts in many places that contrasted the much too big for him baggy and cut up black pants, not to mention the series of bruises and cuts on the skin you could see on him. Through the unfitting shirt you could see he had been underfed. With a physical condition like his it was anyone's guess how the blonde was standing, let alone running from the group chasing him. The blonde hazarded a look behind him, seeing the mob gaining if anything and he had no hiding areas around here he could use. In a desperate act the 5-year-old tried to push over a trash can but all that seemed to do was make the villagers behind him even angrier. Running as fast as his little legs would allow, the boy turned towards the one thing that might save him. The village gate. It was a boundary he had never dared cross before, knowing that with everything, he wouldn't die here, Gigi wouldn't let him, but outside the Hokage had no power, and it would just be him and whatever fate decided. Well, this Uzumaki had never believed in foolish luck or fate, and this was the best opportunity to escape pain. So with a mental apology to his adopted grandfather, the Jinchūriki took the turn and sprinted right out the gates, down the path, and then into the trees, soon outpacing the furious cries as he got away from the villagers. Not looking anywhere aside from straight ahead, the boy ran. Not once did he look back, he just ran. Even when the yells were long gone, he still ran. He ran until he could physically run no longer, and by that time he had made it a long ways, farther than he had ever run before. Only then did it set in that he wasn't home, no longer in familiar territory. It was then he began to wonder what he was supposed to do now. This was a situation that was slightly familiar to the blonde, but not out here in the wild. Since he was 3 and until he was 6, the young boy had lived on Konoha's streets, living off what he could get out of garbage cans. He knew how it was to not sleep indoors, or eat anything but moldy bread. Hell, he still did it since the villagers refused to serve him anything but that when they were forced to allow him to shop there. Soon survival instincts began to kick in then and slowly the blonde decided first and foremost, he needed food and a safe place to stay. So then began the search for a safe resting place. That was essential. If he didn't have a good base of operations, he'd be defenseless against whatever was out here. Before he had a small box, now he would settle for a small cave, anything. Before he got food, he'd gone without food before and he'd do so again. Moving through some bushes, the blonde tried his best to find a cave or somewhere to sleep, but was starting to find he could barely see his own hand, let alone a place to rest. That was until he saw a faint light farther down from where he was. Squinting he tried to make out what it was, before his now sleepy and sluggish mind decided light was sometimes good, so it might be okay to investigate. Light usually meant a warm place to stand by for a little bit at least, and he was starting to get chilled from this night. Moving forward he got close and started to smell the scent of cooking meat. Mouth-watering he snuck as quietly as he could forward, peering through some bushes at a seemingly deserted camp. He peered around, before his eyes caught the sight of 3 birds cooking over a fire. Looking around quickly, he noticed no one was around and darted out, assuming whoever started to make these was gone now. Unfortunately, as soon as he got into grabbing reach of his prize, he felt something sharp against his neck and stopped mid-lunge. Sliding his eyes down, he saw one of the biggest blades he'd ever imagined. It was literally bigger and wider than he was. Slowly he slid his eyes up the length of the blade and spotted its wielder, glaring down at him behind a mask of bandages with no eyebrows or shirt. The man was well muscled, that much was sure. He also had plenty of scars from battles as far as Naruto could guess, and wore one of those metal headbands he had seen ninja in his village wearing, except this one was different looking and had a slash going through it. Now starting to sweat, the young blonde slowly backed up, or at least started to only to come to a stop when the blade slid closer as he moved. Catching on that moving was bad, the blonde kept his frightened gaze on the masked man. Finally, after what seemed a lifetime, the man said in a tone of voice that spelled saying the wrong thing would get him killed. "Were you trying to steal my dinner?" The blonde started sweating more, trying to figure out the best answer before deciding on. "I wasn't stealing, I was surviving, and these birds looked a lot better than eating leaves." Lying was too hard for his mind in this situation, frightened and very tired made every thought seem to come from a long way off. Like a whisper of someone 20 feet away. Now the blonde was silently praying his head wasn't going to be chopped off right here when the man looked out of sight to where Naruto couldn't see due to the blade and nodded. Suddenly there was another set of hands on him, grabbing his arms and legs and tying them together. With a shout of protest, the blonde fell to the side. Looking up, Naruto saw a girl a little older than him, but noticed only one thing about her. The one thing she voiced out loud. "Zabuza-sama, this boy, he has eyes like mine." The girl said quietly, looking up at the bigger man. "He does he? Well then let's see what we have here." The large man, apparently named Zabuza, glared down at the petrified blonde and said, "You've got one chance, kid, even that's only because Haku seems to be interested in you. I'm going to ask 2 questions, answer correctly, and you live, incorrectly and your head's mine. We understand each other." Slowly the last Uzumaki nodded and gulped, hoping that these were really easy questions. If they wanted him to count numbers or something, he was definitely in trouble here. "Good, what's your worst memory?" the man asked, completely serious. Worst memory? I don't have one," the blonde shakily muttered, looking down. Relieved on one part that it wasn't math, but entirely saddened on a whole different aspect, as he looked back on his so far short life. "What do you mean not have one? Everyone has a bad memory. Hell, even a stubbed toe is a bad memory, and judging from the way you're dressed, I can tell your mommy didn't dress you." The demon of the mist growled. Naruto looked down a little more at the mention of having no mother. Boy didn't he know that, he couldn't count how many times he wondered where his mother was, wondering why she wasn't there to hug him like the other kids' moms he had spied from the park, comforting them on the slightest cut. "I don't have a mom, besides, all my memories are kind of the same, waking up, getting those cold looks, wondering what I can find in a trash can and wondering how bad the next beating will be. The only good thing I had going was Ji-san, but he was always too busy to play with me much," Naruto said sulkily. Zabuza looked down at the blonde and nodded slowly and then asked his final question. "Are you willing to be my tool?" Naruto blinked and then swallowed, glaring up at the large man. No. Remember, I have your life in my hands." Zabuza growled out. "I ran from the village so I would have my own freedom, my own will, and wouldn't have to worry about those damn villagers. I'll be damned if I ran all this way just to surrender to someone else. I'll die free," Naruto yelled, a fire burning in his eyes as he glared at the man. Staring some more, Zabuza slowly raised his blade and Naruto shut his eyes tightly, waiting for the inevitable. Suddenly a whistling noise passed him and the boy blinked, looking around and noticing he could move again. Suddenly a stick was thrust in front of his face, holding a tasty-looking piece of meat. "Eat, you'll need your strength to withstand the hell I have in store for your training," Zabuza said, not even looking at the boy anymore. "Training? What do you mean?" Naruto asked in a very confused tone, already working on devouring his meal. It was a free meal and he knew better than to pass this up. "I mean, you're going to become my student. I'll need someone to take my place in the 7, and you might do. If not, I can always kill you later." Turning from looking at the fire he barked out. "Haku, you got first shift. Watch the new Gaki and see if you can analyze him like I've been trying to teach you. Do it correctly and you might get breakfast." The girl who had silently watched until now nodded and turned to the blonde, waiting for her master to head to his tent. I'm Haku, tool to Zabuza-sama. The blonde simply blinked and offered a fake smile. Uzumaki Naruto, tool to no one. Suddenly their introductions were cut off when from the tent a kunai flew, severing a few pieces of the Uzumaki hair. Shut up or I'll decapitate both of you. Haku giggled slightly at the blonde's frightened look and said, welcome to your new home. Why yeah, still not sure if that's a good or bad thing. His only reply to that statement was a small giggle from the girl as she walked towards the fire. Meanwhile in Konoha, an aged Hokage was staring at his crystal ball dully as he watched the picture fuzzily, having traced the blonde since he left, the picture getting dimmer and dimmer and requiring more and more chakra as the blonde got farther away from the village. In truth the aged man had wanted to go and fetch the boy himself, to protect him from the village, but knew he couldn't. The council had already cut off all his attempts to save the child, and if he tried to do so now Ju might be put in a position as to where he could never help the blonde. Instead the aged professor looked down in contemplation before smiling to himself, a plan devising in his mind. He may not be able to help the blonde now, at least physically, but he could ensure Naruto had a place to come back to. Seeing as Naruto was not a shinobi when he left, the blonde would indeed have a place to return to. So instead of sending out Anbu to retrieve the boy, he would give Naruto a chance to live outside of Konoha, and if he so wished it, he could always come back to this village and be welcomed, at least by the Hokage. With a quiet sigh, the third pulled his hat down and said one last prayer. Be safe Naruto-kun, and please come back to us. Chapter 2. Introduction to a New Life. A dark shadow hovered over a sleeping figure, and all was silent throughout the area. Or it was until the shadow figure made a fluent motion and the sleeping figure was shocked awake, freezing and soaked where he had fallen asleep against a tree. The sputtering figure blinked and stared up at the figure that had thrown the water and glared. What the hell was that for? Naruto yelled indignantly as Zabuza smirked behind his mask, moving off to the side. That brat was for sleeping in late. Zabuza replied as he sat down next to what used to be the campfire. Sleeping in late? It's my day off you ass. Naruto replied while giving the bandaged man a death glare that to many it would send dark chills through their spine. Your point. I told you the same thing last month, you get 1 day off a month, but that doesn't mean you get to slack off when it counts. I could have been an enemy and now where would you be? Zabuza asked, absently polishing his blade as he looked at Naruto with an uncaring glaze in his eyes. Naruto's mouth opened and closed a few times like a dying fish before he simply huffed and turned away, muttering about stupid eyebrowless senseis and their inability to be human for a day. As he was muttering, another figure entered the clearing and stifled a giggle at the sight of the soaked blonde pouting off to the side. Turning to her master she asked, you used the bucket again didn't you Zabuza-sama? When she got a grunt in reply and Naruto sending a scathing glare at the man she actually let out the giggle she had held in before. This was routine pretty much on Naruto's days off, and had been for the past 5 years. It actually still surprised the fake hunter nin that Naruto had been with them for so long. It's still like yesterday they found the little blonde boy wandering into their camp. Since that day life had been insanely hectic, but in a good way. The blonde brightened up Haku's life since he had joined their small family. Actually they had brightened up each other's life, as far as Haku was concerned. She knew of Naruto's life before he joined them and still felt the same small pangs of anger and sadness when she remembered Naruto explaining where he came from. Flashback. 3 figures sat around a small burning campfire, 2 simply staring at the flames while the other cleaned a rabbit with ease as he looked to one of the figures staring at the fire. Oi, brat, it's about time you explain some more about yourself. That figure started with a blink of surprise and then turned to his new sensei. Like what? Like where you came from and why you fled from home boy, and where you plan on going from here. Zabuza grunted, giving the 7-year-old an annoyed glare for having to explain himself. Naruto immediately smiled and proclaimed. Life wasn't so bad, I mean it was he was cut off as he gulped at the blade at his neck. Stop bullshitting me and drop that stupid act kid. Being happy is one thing, forcing that idiotic smile will just piss me off, and do you really want me pissed off? Zabuza asked with a deadly glint in his eye. The blonde immediately shook his head. The oversized cleaver was taken away from his throat. Gulping and patting his neck to make sure it was all still there, Naruto let out a breath and slowly closed his eyes before beginning. I came from Konoha, and my life was hell there. I was beaten frequently by villagers whenever they felt like it, and they always glared at me with those cruel eyes, like I was something they scraped off their shoe. I could never get any food unless I went to old man Ichiraku's for ramen, but I stopped after a while when I saw some villagers try and spray paint on the stand. I didn't want to cause them any trouble. The blonde sniffed and shook his head, refusing to let the tears that had threatened to start falling come out. He had learned long ago that crying wouldn't help him. Suddenly an arm wrapped around his neck from behind and Naruto's eyes went wide as he turned to see who held him. To his surprise it was Haku, smiling down comfortingly. "It's okay Naruto-kun. Let it out, you're not alone anymore. You can finally let it all out." Haku whispered, and in seconds the boy's resolve to not cry was broken as he latched himself to Haku as if she were his only life preserver in a raging ocean. While the boy cried, Haku simply comforted him as best she could, all the while realizing she had found a kindred spirit like hers. As he cried, Haku softly whispered, "We're a lot alike Naruto-kun. I know what you're going through exactly. Let me tell you about what happened before Zabuza-sama found me." And as the boy cried, Haku softly told her tale. About her bloodline, about the purge, about being homeless and without use until her master found her. When she had finished, the blonde was no longer crying but staring at the fire with a glossy look in his eyes. Zabuza watched his two charges with hidden emotion, turning away after a while until they were both done crying. Seeing as halfway through her own story Haku had started crying with the blonde, and after she had finished they had both cried just because they had finally found someone like themselves. Turning back when it was quiet, he voiced the question to the glossy-eyed 7-year-old. "You still haven't told us what you're planning on doing from here," Zabuza said, with an uncharacteristically soft voice. The glassy gaze shattered in an instant, replaced with a burning fire of conviction that slightly startled Haku as the boy voiced himself with full determination. "I'm going to train as hard as I can, and become strong enough to show those villagers what I'm worth. I'll earn all their respect and then I'll protect every single one of them by becoming the Hokage. I swear on my life." Zabuza smiled behind his bandaged face and said, "I don't know why you would want to go back to that hellhole, but I'll make damn sure you're strong, brat. Just remember to send some cash my way, Hokage-sama." The title was for once not said sarcastically, probably being the one time in a long while Zabuza would treat anyone as equal. "No problem, sensei. I'll send loads of money your way," Naruto replied with a genuine grin across his face. As Haku smiled behind him, silently vowing to help the blonde on his way to becoming Hokage. End flashback. Haku was shaken from her thoughts as a hand waved in front of her face and she blinked a few times to look into the slightly concerned eyes of one Uzumaki Naruto. "Yo, you okay Haku? You kind of spaced there for a while," Naruto asked, and to her surprise her lack of concentration had been longer than she thought, seeing as the blonde was dressed with his blade already on his hip. That was one of the things Zabuza changed first, Naruto's horrible clothing. At once they set out and bought him some new clothing. That proved disastrous when the two almost broke out into a fight about Naruto wearing orange. Eventually the two came to a compromise due to not being able to move their legs thanks to some well-placed Senbon which allowed Naruto to have an orange thing on him. To which Naruto chose a dark orange pair of wristbands that concealed his training weights. The rest of his outfit came with a dark black shirt with a red spiral on the back, hidden under a blue, borderline black, trench coat that had only the top 2 buttons buttoned, opening up to reveal baggy black and blue camo pants with tons of pockets, a zabuza's insistence that his disciple looked something like him and Naruto refusing to shave off his eyebrows. The look was completed by Naruto getting a sword that suited him, which actually turned to be a modified katana that when chakra was added to it, it separated into 2 separate blades but shorter than the original katana. Over the years Naruto grew his hair out slightly in a ponytail that ended at his shoulder, but his blonde hair being usually covered in a black bandana. Haku smiled down at the blonde boy with a shake of her head. "Sorry Naruto-kun. I'm just fine. Just a bit out of it today." Naruto shrugged and nodded. "Gotcha, so did you hear no brow? We have a new mission to take out some old drunken bridge builder. Apparently it's gonna bring in a whole lot of money. So maybe I can convince the bastard to get us a hotel next time we're in a town." Haku giggled and shook her head. Then we better get ready and get going. You know how master gets when we don't start moving when he wants us to. Hey you two. Stop flirting with each other and pack up. The two blushed and Naruto quickly sent a glare at his sensei. We weren't flirting you jerk. Whatever, before you two start making out get your things in a bag and start moving your asses or I'm leaving you here. Zabuza said, inwardly enjoying tormenting the two. With a grumble from Naruto and a silent blush from Haku, the two set about getting their things together before leaving with their sensei master to start their mission. Meanwhile, in Konoha an aged Hokage rubbed his temples as he looked at the team before him. It had been a few months since the new generation had graduated the Shinobi Academy and already this team was requesting a more difficult mission. Before the aging Hokage, stood Team 7 consisting of Hitaki Kakashi, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Inuzuka Kiba, so far the best of the teams in consistency of getting their missions done, but even so they were fresh out of the academy. Doubt crossed the Hokage's mind as he shifted through his mission stacks to buy time on his decision. As he was shifting through them though, a single one caught his eye and the Hokage blinked and smiled. This was perfect for the group before him. Looking up the Hokage nodded and stated, "Alright then, AC rank mission it is. Team 7 you now have an escort mission to Wave, escorting a bridge builder." The reactions before him were amusing to say the least as Kakashi was surprised enough to actually look up from his perverted book. Sasuke and Sakura looked at Kiba with emotions ranging from annoyance, well mainly annoyance, as the primal shinobi did a victory dance. But Hokage-sama, the Chunin Iruka said beside him before Sarutobi gently waved his hand to cut him off. "They'll be fine Iruka," was all the Hokage offered as he motioned for the escort to be shown in. The bridge builder, who went by the name of Tazuna, walked in and was obviously drunk as he measured Team 7 and yelled, "Hey! I wanted a team, you gave me some Cyclops, an emo, a girl who obviously dyes her hair to fit in, and some kid who smells like he hasn't bathed in days." Each of Team 7 turned to glare at the client, Kiba going as far as trying to stab the man with a kunai, before Kakashi escorted the team and client out. Sarutobi watched it all, smiling and wishing the team luck. They certainly were going to need it. If only Sarutobi knew how much. It was half a day later and Naruto was grumbling, sitting in a bush as he was sent to wait and ambush the bridge builder they were hired to kill. According to Zabuza he was apparently supposed to do this by himself, unless there was someone he couldn't handle. Naruto simply pegged it as the man being too damn lazy and wanting some good money without having to do much. Suddenly the feeling of 4 chakra signatures came to the blonde. Shinobi. According to Gato the bridge builder shouldn't have been able to hire shinobi, just bandits. Damn lying greedy bastard. They better get a damn bonus for this. Watching from his bush he watched the team come around the corner and size them up, wondering if he was going to be able to pull out a sneak attack or not. His eyes landed on their Junin sensei and immediately his planning went to hell. Freaking Sharingan Kakashi. This sucked big time. Cursing under his breath Naruto blinked in shock before instinctively replacing himself with their raised rabbit as a kunai hit the spot his head was, thanks to the kid with a dog on his head. Arriving next to the cage and looking at his sensei and Haku, Naruto performed the wordless hand signals he was taught, informing them on the situation. All Zabuza did was nod before smirking and hefting his blade, throwing it. As he vanished after it and Naruto hearing the screams of "get down" as the scene beside him and Haku unfolded, he turned to her and rolled his eyes, mouthing the words, "Show off," causing the girl to giggle behind her hunter mask. Turning to watch the fight between Junin, Naruto blinked and watched Kakashi get lured into a simple trap. Maybe he overestimated the Konoha Junin. He didn't wait to wonder if he had or not as Zabuza signaled for him to get their target while he had Kakashi. Naruto blinked slightly and smirked, nodding even though he couldn't be seen. Without making a single noise, the blonde swordsman vanished and reappeared in between the protective formation of the 3 genin, his hand on the hilt of his katana. His smirk widened as the genin with the dog on his head yelped in surprise while the pink-haired girl gasped openly. The black-haired kid only tensed though, good to see one was slightly serious. He turned to the horrified old man and shrugged, saying in a bored monotone voice. "Sorry old man, nothing against you or your village but we need the cash." With that his blade slid forward faster than most could comprehend, seemingly turning into a blur to the genin. When instead of the easily tear through resistance of flesh and the sound of skin being split by a blade was replaced with the force of another blade and the sound of metal clashing, Naruto's eyes widened. Instead of his blade severing the head of the bridge builder, it was being blocked by two kunai straining to hold his one blade from their awkward positioning. Following the arm holding the kunai, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the face of the black-haired boy screwed up in concentration. Suddenly the raven-haired Avenger shifted his weight, sliding on of the kunai towards the hilt of Naruto's blade while he threw the second kunai with a flick of his wrist. Naruto brought his blade down, towards the ground as he simply bent his neck to dodge the kunai. After dodging, the blonde stepped back and disengaged blades while sending a kick forward towards the Konoha shinobi's head. Sasuke grit his teeth as he blocked the jarring kick by raising his left arm, rolling with the impact and coming to a standing position a few feet away. He spun quickly, glaring heatedly at the blonde before him who simply looked bored. "Was that supposed to impress me?" The blonde drawled, his sunny persona shifting further behind his shinobi personality. It was something Zabuza had taught him to do during his first year of training, stating that his loud and overconfident personality would get him killed. He said a good shinobi kept his emotions behind him, only out of battle or a mission was he allowed to be himself, on the field he was simply a shinobi. Nothing more, nothing less, until he had the power to achieve his dreams. After that, Zabuza had said he could honestly care less what the blonde did. Sasuke growled more in anger, unknowingly playing right into the blonde's hands by taking the bait and getting more emotional. Just as he was about to charge again, he was stopped by a voice, the voice of their captured teacher. "What are you doing? He's obviously been trained by Zabuza, he's too strong for you. Get yourselves and Tazuna out of here," Kakashi yelled. Suddenly the frozen Kiba broke out of his stupor and shook his head defiantly, growling alongside his partner Akamaru. "No way, Kakashi-sensei. You taught us that those who abandon their mission are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. There's no way we're leaving you behind. There is only one of him and three of us, we'll take him down and get you out of there in no time. And Inuzuka never abandons their pack." Zabuza simply laughed. "Let the kids play, Kakashi, I want to test my student." Kakashi simply glared, about to protest again when Kiba took action. "Beast human clone no jutsu. I wrote this chapter without internet, as will most of my chapters be typed, so bear with me please. I know some jutsu off the top of my head, but not many." Everyone turned towards the feral shinobi to find not one, but two of him. Both were on all fours and as one shot forward, attacking the blonde in perfect synchronization and finesse. One Kiba jumped off the other's back, slicing at the blonde as he sailed over him while the other jumped forward and started spinning using chakra, the other Kiba doing the same once he hit the ground on the other side of him. There was a chorused shout of "Gatsuga" as the two spinning forms took on a look of bouncing gray drills. Naruto's eyebrows shot up as he started backpedaling, flipping backwards to avoid one drill as it smashed into the ground he was on not a second before, making a small crater as the other drill flew up, on a course to shred into the blonde. Turning in the air, Naruto brought his blade up, reinforcing it with chakra and tensing his muscles, knowing this was going to be slightly difficult. The drill slammed into his blade, pushing it toward him centimeter by centimeter before with a grunt Naruto forced his blade down with all his strength, sending the drill down, on course with a rather large rock. The drill slammed into it, tearing apart half of it before stopping in a puff of smoke revealing an unconscious and slightly beaten white dog. Naruto landed and spun just in time to hear an enraged howl before the other drill increased its speed, tripling its force. Eyes widening, Naruto jumped back, dodging the drill just barely, the front of his shirt ripping while three shallow cuts formed on his chest. Just as he landed from his slight jump, the swordsman ducked, dodging the enraged Konoha nin once more by centimeters. Gritting his teeth, the blonde finally had enough of this as with two hand seals, a vortex of water sprung up, forming another Naruto. Together with his clone, Naruto waited for the drill to turn, and when it was as close as it could get and they could still dodge, they both stepped wide to either side of it, bringing the blades, sharpened slightly by chakra, to slash the drill's side. There was a pained groan as the drill deformed in mid-air, twin twirling arcs of blood spinning along with the falling Inuzuka. The dog shinobi hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop with shallow cuts going down both of his arms. They could still be moved, but it would cause a load of pain until they healed. Sighing in relief at that problem being taken care of, Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he felt the buildup of chakra behind him before he heard a yell. Grand Fire Ball Jutsu. Without thinking, the blonde ran forward with his top speed, blurring to everyone except the Junin and Haku, who was watching from the bushes. Outrunning the distance the fireball could travel and running around the pink-haired girl, grabbing her and throwing her at the Uchiha, grinning as she slammed into him and caused him to choke on his fire, coughing up smoke. Naruto looked to his sensei and smirked but blinked in surprise at what he was seeing. The two Junin were talking as if nothing was going on. So you took him in after he left, Kakashi asked, looking at the man while sitting cross-legged in his prison, knowing he was trapped and accepting it would take a miracle to save him. Yeah, he is now my apprentice. Zabuza replied, knowing Naruto would handle the rest. You want to make a deal? Kakashi asked. You're not really in a position to make deals right now, Copy Ninja. The demon of the mist growled. Before Kakashi could say more, a blade flashed down, between the two men. The prison was released and a raging Naruto stood between them. He glared at his sensei. I kicked their asses and you don't even watch. You bastard sensei. Zabuza smirked and threw Naruto onto shore once more. You took too long. I have to now recapture Kakashi thanks to you. His tone was irritated, but it was easy to see he was excited to fight more. Kakashi glared at the man, knowing his deal would have to be put off until he defeated Zabuza. Naruto grumbled and sat down, watching the Junin in boredom. At least until Kakashi started doing some weird things. He seemed to be able to read Zabuza's mind. Suddenly Zabuza was in a position to be killed and Naruto's eyes were wide. At least until Haku intervened. Naruto chose that moment when all attention was on her to make his escape into the mist, knowing they would all meet at Gato's headquarters. Naruto arrived at the meeting place close to 20 minutes later than Haku. When he came into the room, spotting Zabuza being fussed over by Haku, he walked over, grumbling about really needing to be taught the Shushin Jutsu. Both Zabuza and Haku knew it, but he didn't. It just wasn't fair. Looking down at his sensei, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the state he was in. He's going to be trouble, isn't he? Naruto asked out loud, not really addressing a specific person. If you're speaking about the copy ninja, he's mine. I figured out his little parlor trick. Too bad you couldn't have figured that out before you got your ass handed to you. The blonde said, snickering slightly. Before Zabuza could retort, Haku had a Senbon in a pressure point on both their jaws, making them hang open. She smiled sweetly before saying, "You two weren't going to fight, were you?" They both quickly shook their heads no, so fast they could have had whiplash. Haku just nodded before taking the Senbon. "Both of you rest, I'm going to look at what I can and grab some herbs later. You should be up in a week, Zabuza-sama." "Good, then we attack the bridge as soon as I'm at full power," Zabuza said from his position on the bed, closing his eyes. "Need some help then, Haku-chan?" Naruto asked with a slight smile, knowing he had nothing better to do. "Your help would be nice, Naruto-kun, thank you." With that, they went off to rest, deciding the next day to grab their sensei's medicine. Naruto leaned against a tree, watching from above as Haku gathered herbs. He would be down there with her, but she convinced him not to. The team from Konoha had seen him and would definitely recognize him if they were around. She had much less chance of being found. So instead he was watching over her in case of trouble. Blinking, he watched her happen upon the dog boy of Team 7, who just woke up. On guard, he watched the scene between the two unfold, waiting for something to happen. Instead, the boy simply asked to help her with her gathering after they had a brief conversation. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto smirked. If Konoha shinobi were truly this easily fooled, any mission against them in the future was sure to be a breeze. After Haku had her herbs and they parted company, Naruto dropped down next to her and smiled. "Precious people, huh, I like that. How come I've never heard of it before? I thought it was silly." Haku mumbled with a slight blush. Naruto smiled. "Silly? No way. I think that will become my new nindo, to protect my precious people, my way of the shinobi." Haku blinked in surprise and then smiled slightly, looking down. Silently thanking the blonde for accepting what she had said. "Hey, Haku." "Yes, Naruto-kun. You're one of my few precious people and no matter what I'll protect you," he said, fully serious as she looked at her. "Haku, touched and embarrassed, nodded quickly and quietly as they went on their way. Oddly enough, until zabuza was better, Naruto didn't see Haku at all for the rest of the week. He thought nothing of it, truly oblivious to everything. Chapter 3. Flat Chapter. This past week had been tedious for a certain ice wielder. Between taking care of zabuza and avoiding Naruto, she had little time to herself. Thinking of the blonde, the ice user let out a sigh and shook her head, irritated at herself. She was behaving like some weak little village girl instead of the shinobi she was. He said one touching thing and suddenly she was blushing and wondering about her feelings for him. Sure, she knew she had a crush on the blonde, but she figured it would pass. Instead he did things like that and Haku's crush grew bigger. Now she was even questioning if her feelings were starting to rival her gratitude to her master, but she knew she owed zabuza a deal more. Naruto wasn't as big as that, but with the strides he was taking. Shaking her head one more time, she mentally berated herself. This was why she had to avoid the blonde. He always brought up these distracting thoughts now. Still, she would do everything physically to help the blonde. That would never change. The boy was one of her precious people as well after all. Suddenly a voice from the room next to her called for her and blinking, Haku walked through the doorway wondering what her master wanted. Blinking in surprise when he wasn't in bed, she saw him picking up his blade. "Zabuza-sama, you're not fully recovered yet," she said sternly, moving toward him. He always ignored her medical advice. The man simply shrugged and looked at her over his shoulder. "I'm fine and I'm sick of sitting here. Stop avoiding Blondie and grab him, we're heading to the bridge to end this." Haku simply sighed in resignation. If there was one thing she knew, it was that when her master decided he was better, there was no amount of talking or action less than physically disabling him that would convince him otherwise. So with a nod she turned and walked from the room, knocking on the door that led to Naruto's sleeping quarters. She blinked when she heard a scuffle behind the door and some yelling and glared at the door, moving with shinobi instinct and kicking the door in, Senbon in each hand, posed to launch them at any assailant in the area. Instead she was met with the sight of Naruto, clad only in boxers, tangled up in sheets and blankets, upside down with said boxers dangerously close to being revealing. Both teens' eyes met for an instant before Naruto tried to escape his sheets with more passion and Haku turning away, her face as red as a tomato. This was not helping her confusing thoughts any. Frantically she tried to find something, anything, to distract herself from the sight she had seen. Finally Naruto had righted himself, untangled from the blanket, and blushingly looked away. This was one of the worst ways he could think of to start the day. He decided to res a bit more today, and now Haku had caught him like that. Moving nervously from foot to foot, the blonde tried to laugh his way out of the situation. "Hey, Haku-chan, do you need something?" Naruto asked, embarrassment obvious in his voice. Haku forced herself to look the boy in the eyes and nod briefly. "Zabuza-sama is awake and well, we're heading out very soon so you should get ready to leave." Naruto blinked a few times before grinning and jumping into the air, pumping his fist. "Yes, finally we can get the hell out of this boring place and do something interesting. I can wait to fight some more," Naruto exclaimed, running to his pack and throwing dirty clothes haphazardly around the room before finding a relatively clean one. Without thinking he was about to start changing before he heard a scream of his name and a door being slammed. Looking back and blinking, he saw the spot where Haku had been empty. Shrugging, the blonde started changing once more, oblivious to the black-haired girl outside his room, cursing the Uzumaki swordsman for making things so damn awkward before heading to her own room. She had a battle to prepare for. When Naruto was finally out of his room, he found both Haku and Zabuza gone. His eyes widened and he cursed, damn them for leaving him here. They were gonna take all the good opponents for themselves now. Opening the window next to him, the blonde blasted out of the room, heading on a reckless course to the bridge. When he was getting close, he noticed that a mist had formed and was getting thicker as he got closer to the bridge. Damn, he needed to speed up now, or he wouldn't have anyone to fight when he got there. With that in mind he went even faster, sending small pumps of chakra to his legs. On the bridge, Team 7 had just arrived, spotting the unconscious bodies of the workers under Tezuna's command. Immediately Team 7 went into a defensive formation, Kakashi standing in front of them all. Suddenly two figures appeared before them. Zabuza was back and so was the hunter Nin who took him from death. All the members of Team 7 immediately noticed there was a missing member of the team from the missing shinobi. Kakashi smiled at the two, trying to pull in friendly, hoping that before they fought he could mention this deal of his. Konnichiwa, Zabuza, Hunter Nin-san. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk for a moment. First, where's Uzumaki-san, and is there any way you could possibly, just join Konoha with him? The only way you're getting the gaki is over my dead body copy Nin. Now stop talking and fight. Zabuza said with a smirk before sending a water clone at the genin guarding the bridge builder, knowing the brats wouldn't be able to handle it. To his immense surprise though, one of the genin sped up and took his clone unawares, landing a fatal blow. Seems like the black-haired runt has speed. Zabuza muttered with a smirk. Haku nodded, fully in her shinobi persona. So it seems, allow me to deal with him Zabuza-sama. Haku said, taking on Senbon. The Uchiha simply smirked before pulling out a kunai and meeting the ice user in the middle of a large puddle. We're matched. The raven-haired Avenger said smugly, smirking as they spun once more and he once again met the Hunter Nin's needle with his blade. Not quite genin. Haku said coolly, using some one-handed hand seals and sending a barrage of ice needles at the boy. He simply hopped out of the way and Haku followed, their battle flowing farther down bridge before Haku decided to make this quick and pull her blood limit out. Kakashi and Zabuza watched them take off, Kakashi nodding seriously. It'll be a close fight. He commented, turning to keep his eyes on the Mist Swords man. Zabuza simply smirked. Haku has it in the bag, once she uses her blood limit, your gaki is in trouble. Kakashi's eye widened and he was about to run to help when Zabuza vanished into the mist. You run to help him and I kill the other two and the bridge builder, your choice. Zabuza said, his laugh echoing all around. Glaring Kakashi moved his headband up and looked to his two remaining students, one who looked scared witless while the other simply seemed a bit angry. Cover Tazuna, don't let anything happen to him. With that he took off into the mist, leaving the two genin alone. Kiba growled and sighed as he felt the gentle muzzling of his partner on his head. He turned to Sakura and smirked. Relax, we'll be fine. The other kid's not here and Kakashi-sensei had that Zabuza. His words did little to reassure Sakura, but at least he could say he tried. She was scared stiff, while he was just irritated. Sasuke, the Uchiha prick, actually managed to get someone to fight, while he was sitting on the sidelines. Honestly he wanted the other guy to come back, he wanted to repay him for what he did to him and his partner. The blonde prick would pay, before he did what Kakashi instructed them to do and captured the blonde, taking him with them to Konoha. As if his prayers were answered, a form dropped from nothing revealing the blonde swordsman looking at them unimpressed. Kiba was slightly pissed at that look, and was about to attack when the other boy's head dropped. Blinking in confusion his enhanced hearing could make out the whisper of he was always getting stuck with the horrible opponents. Kiba's confusion vanished and was replaced with fury. With familiar seals his partner was in his clone form and both Kibas growled. Treat us like nothing will you? We're gonna kick your ass from here to Konoha. With that the two charged, following the laughing blonde as he dodged claw sweeps, leaving a poor Sakura all alone with the bridge builder. Sasuke was starting to get pissed. Actually, he was already there, but now he was getting desperate. After they moved out of eyesight of the Junin, the shinobi he was facing did this odd jutsu and then vanished into one of the many mirrors in this new dome he was trapped in. Not only that, but this ice seemed to be impervious to his Kaden jutsu. Now he had a few needles sticking out of everywhere and was desperately trying to find a way out of this, barely getting by with the skin of his teeth. Suddenly another wave of Senbon rained down and he blocked as many as he could, skidding back and panting as he stopped moving. Charging forward he started hand seals for another grand fireball when something happened. Things seemed to slow down for him. He blinked, seeing Senbon heading for him and knowing exactly where they were going. With quick maneuvering, he blocked every one of them. Behind her mask, Haku's eyes widened as one of his fastest Senbon strikes was blocked with a sudden ease. She tried to find what changed with her opponent and immediately saw his eyes and curse. It seemed the raven-haired boy had some kind of dojutsu, and while it was still undeveloped, it might give him a new edge to this fight. She had to try and end this fast. Sasuke knew the other sensed something off, because immediately barrage after barrage of Senbon at him, faster and even more deadly than before. Still, whatever had happened before was still going on because he actually was managing to dance in and out of the raining Senbon needles, blocking where he needed and getting far fewer cuts than he had before. Unfortunately, he was purely on defense right now, so until the other shinobi slipped up or ran out of chakra, he wouldn't be able to attack. He didn't have to wait long. While this attack had finished off many shinobi in the past, it also zapped a lot of Haku's chakra, so now with that in mind, Haku started to get desperate and was a little slower in moving from mirror to mirror, and the Uchiha capitalized on that fact, hitting her leg with a fireball and tripping her up. In the process of her falling, her mirrors began to fall as well. Before she could even hit the ground, the Uchiha clotheslined her falling form, sending her crashing into the ground and skidding to a stop against a wall. She pushed herself up when a kunai was placed against her neck. She froze and looked through her mask at the Uchiha's cold red eyes and then closed hers, knowing she was in trouble, and Zabuza and Naruto were too far away to help with this one. With a final thought, she resigned herself to this fate, regretting she hadn't been able to help Naruto or her master, and for not sorting out all those feelings. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. At first this fight had seemed funny to Naruto. He knew the boy's skills, having fought him before, but now he was starting to get a little annoyed. Apparently the two had been working on teamwork, because Naruto simply couldn't get a moment to catch his bearings. Every time he touched down on the ground, he was moving again, and when he jumped left, there was another drill there, and when he ran right, there was the other. At the moment he knew that the others had their fights going on. He could sense Haku's domes and the two Junin were easy to pinpoint, but he didn't know how they were faring, and that worried him. He knew they could handle themselves, but Haku had her blood limit up for a while now, and that was bad. He knew firsthand how destructive that just you could be, having it been used on him to practice his speed evasion training, but he also knew she couldn't keep it up for long. Whoever she was facing had to be good. Landing from another jump, Naruto leaned back at an almost 90-degree angle before turning his motion into a backhand spring as he dodged another dog bullet. Tensing his arms lower than normal, he shot high and quickly drew his blade, deciding he needed to go on the offense. Landing, the boy sprinted forward, throwing himself forward and placing a hand on the ground and pushing off, giving himself more speed and an opposite rotation of the K9 torpedoes. Adding chakra to his push, he made a crude bladed version and met head-on. His blades crossed before him, with one of the drilling shinobi. The collision made a large exploding sound from the colliding chakra forces before the two flung apart in opposite directions, one of the kibas landing in a daze while Naruto rolled to his feet, slightly dizzy but still combat ready. It was good that he was too, because the blonde was moving quickly after standing, dodging the drill that was desperate to pick up the slack. It was times like these he hated Zabuza for not teaching him more cool kick-ass jutsu. He could use one of those cool water dragons to take them both down, but all in the ways of jutsu that he knew was simply the water clone, henge, kawamari, and some elemental manipulation. He for his chakra in different ways around his blade, and knew decently how to mess with water, but he knew nothing beside that. Zabuza said the best shinobi and swordsmen made their own forms, which included jutsu. The Uzumaki knew for a fact that lazy bastard didn't make up his own just you. After this he promised himself he'd kick Zabuza's ass until he taught him some cool jutsu. Taking his mind off that, the blonde decided to do what he did best and improvise. So vanishing into the mist temporarily, Naruto made 20 water clones and they all fanned out. The drill seemed to slow before starting to attack the running Narutos while the original made his way to the stunned Kiba, regaining his senses. Grabbing him by the coat, the blonde held one of his two blades to his neck and yelled for the other drill. "Oi, unless you want him gutted, I'd suggest you stop." The other drill stopped, landing on another clone and making it vanish by landing on it mid-jump. The Kiba gave a slight whine before the one being held by the blade shouted, "Drill right through me and hit this bastard Akamaru. We can't let this village down." Naruto blinked in shock, his shinobi persona falling slightly. "What is in this village that would make you lay down your life for it?" Naruto asked the same question Zabuza had asked him when Naruto said one day he would go back to Konoha. "It doesn't matter what is in this village. These people are suffering and you're helping the bastard who's doing it. I'll lay my life down to make all these people's lives better, and this bridge will do it," Kiba said fiercely, glaring over his shoulder. For a moment Naruto let his true self shine through as he grinned brightly. "Good answer. It's kind of like why I'm going to go back and protect my home, whether those damn villagers want me to or not. With that he was about to move one of his clones to tie the boy up when he suddenly got a very bad feeling about something that was going to happen. Turning his head in the direction of the bad feeling and his eyes widened. Just barely visible he could see the form of a kneeling haku, about to have a kunai slice across her throat. Naruto dropped his blade and started sprinting, knowing he was too far away but knowing he had to get there, to save her. He had promised he would protect her, his precious person. His eyes focused on the falling blade and Naruto closed his eyes, tears falling slightly as he moved his fastest and suddenly he felt himself falling down a dark deep hole before softly landing in a large puddle. Opening his eyes, he looked around in confusion, wondering where exactly he was. What had happened to the bridge? Frowning he felt a pull down a certain hallway and simply followed the pull, taking many twists and turns before arriving before a large cage. On the cage an oversized piece of paper sat before him with the word seal written on it. This was odd. Before he could ponder this any longer, two large red eyes opened before him and a feral grin, with sharp teeth each the size of him, flashed out at him. So, you have finally come, a dark rumbling voice rang out from behind the bars. Finally come. Who the hell are you and where am I? Naruto asked loudly, glaring at the large form behind the bars. You're in yourself, and as to who am I am the great Kyuubi no Kitsune. Show some respect. The demon, now identified as the Kyuubi grumbled. Kyuubi? Yeah, and I'm the Tooth Fairy. If we're in me, why the hell are you in me? Naruto asked, still glaring, wanting to return back to the bridge. He needed to save Haku. I was sealed in you by the leader of your village, I believe he called himself the fourth Hokage. Don't you wonder why the villagers hated you? Me, for that I do apologize, but I do no more than that. Just because your life was shit, I owe you nothing. Kyuubi said with a growl. You bastard. Naruto yelled in rage. You're the reason I was hated, why everyone gave me those cold stares, but I should thank you, because of you, I would never have grown up and found Zabuza sensei and Haku. So bastard fox, I thank you, now send me back before I kick your ass. Naruto said, giving the demon a level stare. Why am I here anyway? You need my help. You need my power. Before he could finish, the Uzumaki swordsmen interrupted. Screw that. I'll get by on my own power, not riding the coattails of someone else. Naruto growled. The demon glared before freezing the boy with killer intent. Show me respect, hairless ape. I may be sealed, but you should know your place. Still, your outlook on this intrigues me. So, I will do something else instead, but in doing this you owe me a favor. I will unlock your hidden bloodline, it should help in this. Do you accept? Naruto glared at the demon, struggling to move under all the killer intent directed at him before letting out a breath and thinking it over. What's the favor? And I want to know more about this sealing and everything else. I would scream at you now, but Haku-chan needs me. I'll call upon the favor when the time is right, until then you must grow stronger. As for the seal, if the copy ninja still lives, ask him. It was his sensei who did this after all. Kyuubi replied, waiting for the answer still. Naruto thought for a few more moments before looking up at the kitsune and simply nodding. Do it, allow me to protect my precious person. The demon smirked and sent a flash of yoki through the boy's system. It's done. The Hirishin is now yours to wield, you'll have to figure out how it works on your own, but it should work in this situation. Now go boy, time is short. With that final word from the demon, the boy felt himself thrown from his mind and back into the world of the present. Naruto's eyes opened and his eyes focused on the blade once more, it's still falling but this time something was different. He felt a part of his chakra leaving his body and wrap around the hilt of the kunai and suddenly a large tug pulled Naruto through the air. To everyone else the boy simply vanished and reappeared in a flash of orange light before he was in front of Haku, his arms outspread, taking the dagger to the back. He blinked for a moment in surprise and then looked down at Haku, whose eyes opened slightly at the sound of metal hitting flesh and then they widened. He smiled weakly, feeling drained as the pain of the hit set in. Told you, I'd save you. He mumbled before falling to the side, his eyes rolling into the back of his head. Tears fell from Haku's eyes as she looked down at the boy who had just saved her life. She had resigned herself to dying for them, and here he was saving her, dying for her, looking to the Uchiha, who was standing in shock. She flicked Tsusenbon into his neck, knocking him out before ripping off the blonde's coat and shirt, easing the kunai out. The wound was deep, but luckily not fatal. Oddly though, he had cuts all over his arms and chest, looking like high-pressure paper cuts. Shaking her head, she did her best to wrap the wound before she felt Zabuza-sama was in trouble. She tried to force an ice mirror, but her chakra wouldn't comply. Her mind was frantic in worry over Naruto and now Zabuza. Luckily miracles seemed to be piling up today as what she saw next shocked and elated her. Zabuza glared at the infamous copy ninja Kakashi, wondering how exactly he had gotten into this predicament. He had dogs binding his arms and legs, and his sword was off to his left in the mist. Not only that, but through the whole fight Kakashi had been proposing some kind of offer for him, Haku, and Naruto to actually come to Konoha with him. "You're going to have to kill me, Kakashi, that's the only way they'll set foot there until I say they're ready." Zabuza growled, trying to break away from the dogs. Kakashi sighed and steeled his gaze before starting his hand signs. "Very well, goodbye Zabuza." With that the charge of the Reikiri built up and Kakashi's hand as he rushed forward, intent on shoving his hand through the mist demon's chest. It seemed as if the demon's death was assured when out of nowhere a blade crackling with the same white-blue electricity surrounding Kakashi's hand got in the way. The blade cracked and hissed before both fields of lightning cancelled out each other and the dogs started growling at the newcomer. Holding a blade loosely in one hand, Kakashi blinked when he saw who had interrupted his attack. Before him, wearing a slashed-through headband just like Zabuza's on his neck, was a man around 5 feet 8 in height and seemed a bit wiry, but what shocked Kakashi was the monk's grin like he had just do something really fun, something belonging on that of a child. He had dark black hair cutting around his hair in loose manner, not falling longer than his eyes, with a large white streak going off to the right. He wore a dark black tank top and baggy black pants, 2 blades on either hip along with a belt filled with different color stones and a seemingly empty slot. Kakashi looked to the blade and saw a glowing yellow topaz placed in the hilt of the drawn sword and wondered slightly who he was dealing with. The newcomer grinned at both of them before turning to Zabuza, who was staring at the man, or teen, Kakashi couldn't tell, with shock in his eyes. Then the mysterious swordsman exclaimed in a happy voice something that made Kakashi almost fall over in laughter. "Hey Zabu, I came just in time to save you from being zapped. Do I have amazing timing or what?" Grinning, he literally pat himself on the back before seemingly just noticing the large dogs. "Oh, maybe not," the newcomer shrugged and turned to Kakashi. "So, what did he do to make you mad?" "Let me guess, he said you had a freaky eye." "No worries, we all have one weird thing or another. Like Zabu. He used to sleep with his sword like it was a teddy bear." At this Kakashi did fall over. He knew this was a battlefield, but he couldn't help it. Imagining the infamous demon of the mist cuddling his blade was far too much of a powerful mental image. Zabuza looked murderous. "Jace, what the hell are you doing here?" he growled, his eyes promising death as soon as he was free of this mess. The now identified Jace blinked and turned back and smiled. "I wanted to see Midget and little Haku. Where are they? I brought them presents," Jace said, nodding and patting a side pocket. Zabuza growled some more. "Have you noticed that we're in the middle of a battle here?" Jace blinked and looked around, as if noticing everything for the first time. The mist was rapidly thinning without constant flow of chakra to it, so Jace could see everyone and what was going on. Naruto, looking very pale with an almost crying Haku over him, not a good sign, so Jace turned to Kakashi and asked politely. "Can you make your doggies go bye-bye? I'm sure we can talk this out." Kakashi blinked and sat up. Since hearing the swordsman's name he had stopped laughing, trying to remember where he had heard it from. "I've been trying to do that since the beginning," Kakashi muttered, dispelling his ninkin. Zabuza stood shakily and glared, about to open his mouth when suddenly a clapping was heard. Everyone turned to see a very large-sized army of mercenaries standing before a small mouse-like man who was laughing. "Demon of the Mist, huh? Couldn't defeat one group from Konoha, what a waste. At least one of them looks like they took out that damn blonde. I've wanted to do that since the beginning. Oh well, just means I don't have to pay you now, and my men can do whatever with this hostage." Quote, 2 men brought out a tied-up and gagged tsunami, lecherous grins on their faces. Haku, who already looked ready to kill the man from his comment on Naruto, but seeing what he meant about the women she was close to standing. Jace slowly popped one of the stones from his blade and slipped in a dark blue sapphire. In his other blade he slipped in a white diamond in the hilt before drawing it as well, slashing the air and sending chakra to both blades. 2 waves of chakra turned into a blast of water and wind, the water blasting a good portion of the mini army, hitting the 2 men holding the woman first but missing her completely, following the wind blast, which instantly froze anything hit by the water wave. Jace knelt, panting slightly and glaring while Kakashi had moved and grabbed the woman and was back in a flash. Picking himself up, Jace looked to Kakashi and then to Zabuza. He smirked and said in a light voice, "Damn, I meant to get all of them. Luckily I made a mouse sculpture." Grinning he pointed to a frozen statue of Gato, frozen in a scream. Suddenly the mercenaries, realizing their pay stub was gone, started getting angry. They all started advancing as one before an arrow slammed into the ground before them. Behind the shinobi a group of people from the village. In front was a child, the grandson of the bridge builder. "Leave our homes alone," he shouted, and they mercenaries, now outnumbered, fled. Jace wrapped an arm around both Kakashi and Zabuza and yawned. "Let's get somewhere we can talk, I've been traveling forever. Call off the genin so we can look after the wounded." Zabuza sighed, seeing his paycheck turning false, simply nodded, not sure where to go from here. They had actually needed that money. "Fine, Kakashi, lead the way. You'll explain your deal to the Gaki and we'll see what he wants." Kakashi nodded, smiling happy as he called out to his genin. Sakura, who had dragged Tazuna with her as she checked on her Sasuke-kun, looked up to him when he called, as did Kiba, looking up from where he was looking at Naruto with a confused expression on his face. "Let's meet at Tazuna's house. We're all done here, mission complete." The genin smiled while Haku lifted Naruto up, Sakura shouldering her precious Sasuke-kun. It was 3 days before everyone was up and fully recovered. Now was the time for a group meeting. Kakashi stood before everyone, leaned against a wall with his nose in his little orange book. Oddly enough, Zabuza had one just like it, sitting on the couch with a bored expression. Kakashi looked up when everyone was there and smiled slightly. "All right, now that we're all here." To that statement he got glares all around. Since he had been the last one there, everyone else had been there for over an hour. "Let M introduce everybody. I'm Hatake Kakashi." He then pointed to Zabuza on the couch. "That's Momochi Zabuza." He pointed to the 2 on the opposite couch. "That would be Uzumaki Naruto and Momochi Haku." He pointed to his 3 genin sitting on the floor, "and my genin Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Inazuka Kiba." He heard an indignant bark and chuckled. "Sorry," and his partner Akamaru. He then pointed to Jace. "You're the 7th swordsman, elemental swordsman Jace Haruta, aren't you?" Jace smiled and nodded, jumping up. "That's right. Now I'll never remember all those names, so I'll give you all nicknames." He then proceeded to point to everyone. He first pointed to Kakashi and Zabuza. "You're now Scarecrow and No Brow." He pointed to Haku and Naruto. "Ice Princess and Midget," then shifted to the 3 genin and said, "Emo, Dog Boy, and Pinky." With that done he nodded and sat back down. Everyone besides Kakashi was giving him a death glare to which he obliviously hummed through. Zabuza sighed and turned to Kakashi, "Just get on with your deal." "Right, Naruto, I want to give you and the rest of you the chance to come to Konoha." Naruto blinked at the copy ninja and then said, "What's the catch?" "No catch, simply come and become a shinobi of Konoha. We can offer you asylum from Hunter Nin and claim you as our own. Not all of Konoha will welcome you, but it's the best chance to achieve Hokage status, Naruto blinked and looked down before turning to Haku. "What do you think?" She blinked and then smiled. "I would love to see your home village, Naruto-kun." Naruto blinked and then nodded. "All right, I'll take the deal," Naruto said in a low murmur, nervous about going home. Kakashi smiled and patted the boy on the back. "Good, I'll send word ahead of us to let Hokage-sama know what to expect." Jace blinked and raised his hand, waving it like a 5-year-old with a question. Kakashi smiled and nodded. "Do I get to come?" "I don't see why not," Kakashi said with a slight smile. Jace jumped up happily and yelled something about victory training before running out. Zabuza sighed. So much potential, wasted on a mask and a girl, poor kid. Kakashi blinked and looked at him curiously and Zabuza shook his head. "That's for him to explain. Anyway, since I'm going now, I'm gonna rest. Wake me up when you're leaving." Zabuza muttered, walking off with his nose still in the book he borrowed from Kakashi. Chapter 4. Team 7 had officially decided as a whole, the trip back from Wave was going to be an extremely long one. It had only been a day on the 3-day trip, and already they were steadily being driven into an urge to kill a certain swordsman due to his oblivious and idiotic antics. Zabuza's group just found it all hilarious. One situation was happening now, as they walked down the dirt path. Decidedly they chose to walk back, instead of moving at more shinobi-like speeds, due to the simple fact that they could. After all, Konoha wasn't expecting them back for another week. Team 7 was walking in a horizontal line down the path, Sakura berating Kiba for making an offhanded joke about her hair color in mid-conversation, something about how wonderful nature was on her part and him asking if her hair was actually naturally that color. Sasuke simply brooded off next them, while Kakashi read his little orange book next to the last Uchiha. To someone like Jace, the joke was itching to be made. So somehow appearing on the end and getting everyone's arms to link up, he started skipping, more or less dragging the rest of them along with him as he went. Oh, we're off to see the wizard. The wonderful Wizard of Oz. After a good 10 minutes of singing and skipping, the teen stopped and grinned, pointing to each. We're going to ask the wizard for gifts. Pointing to the scarecrow Junin he shouted, you need a brain. Then he paused, shifting his finger between both the Junin and Naruto, going. Well, actually you both need one, so you can both be the scarecrow. After getting an indignant shout and a lazy glare from both respectively, he moved on to the rest of his joke, his stupid grin never leaving his face. Moving to his pink-haired target, he supplied her questioning, borderline glare with a gleeful, "We'll ask him to give you courage." He shifted to pointing between Zabuza and Sasuke, ignoring the banshee scream from an enraged Pinkett, saying, "You two need hearts." Frowning as if in though he grinned and stated, "And Haku can be Dorothy." Smiling as if he was finished, he obliviously walked past all the dirty looks when Kiba suddenly shouted. "What about me?" Jace grinned, his setup landing hook, line and sinker. "Oh, you wanted to be Dorothy. Well, if you enjoy wearing a dress, that's your thing. The pup can be Toto if you like," Jace said with a cheeky grin, smirking at the enraged but speechless look on Kiba's face. With that he happily walked in front of everyone on his way back, the only one he hadn't managed to make angry being Haku. The whole confrontation pretty much set the mood for the rest of the walk to Konoha, and the meeting thereafter. One aged-old Hokage was sitting behind his desk, reading specific documents meant for no one's eyes but his own. In layman's terms, reading the same little orange book Kakashi was often seen with. Just as he was getting to a good part of his story, he heard a slight ruckus behind the heavy oak doors leading to his office, something about not being able to barge in there when the two doors were kicked open rather hard, sending both to make indents in his wall. Twitching, about to give the interrupter a piece of his mind when suddenly he froze at the shock of blonde hair and the foxy grin on the teen before him. He had grown a great deal since he had last seen him, but that smile never changed. His suspicion was confirmed when the voice, loud as ever, shouted in an uncaring crass tone. "Hey, old man, you ready to retire and give me your job yet?" What happened next was a slight bit more of a surprise to the aged Hokage as from behind her a beautiful black-haired girl, just a bit older than Naruto it seemed, appeared behind the boy and swiftly grabbed the boy's ear. In a soft but stern voice the girl let out a warning to the blonde. "I thought we agreed you wouldn't make a scene until after we were introduced, Naruto-kun." The boy had seemed to pale considerably before answering. Sorry Haku-chan. Won't happen again." Letting out a loose bit of nervous laughter, he was suddenly yelping in pain as the girl dragged him before the desk and forcefully making him bow with her as they apologized. The god of shinobi could only smile wider at the scene, remembering a very similar couple back before the boy had been born. "All right, if you two are done with your lover's spat." A voice called from the doorway and Sarutobi looked up in surprise to see two ranked missing shinobi before him in his doorway, behind a slightly ragged-looking Team 7. Without missing a beat the old man turned to Kakashi and simply stated. "You better explain. It's a long and funny story, Hokage-sama." Kakashi said with an eye smile as a blushing Naruto and Haku glared daggers at the former 7th swordsman of the mist, who simply ignored them. The Hokage simply folded his hands before him and raised an eyebrow. "Well then, lucky for you Kakashi, I have plenty of time and I do enjoy to laugh, now tell me what happened." With that, the tale of their mission was retold, from the demon brother encounter, to which Sasuke took out with the aid of one of Kiba's Suga, to the initiator and first sighting of Naruto, to the final battle at the bridge. Currently they were still on that topic as the genin were retelling your battle. Sasuke was getting to the end of his fight. I was about to strike and take out the enemy. Said enemy looked down in shame at her defeat, missing the scathing look from the blonde sent to the last Uchiha. Sasuke didn't notice it at all, or if he did he deemed the reactions below his notice. When Uzumaki somehow got in front of me, though he was on the other side of the bridge. The last statement was filled with confusion as he shot the blonde a look that screamed for him to explain. Kiba, remembering this certain action, nodded and added his 2 cents. It was really weird. Me and Akamaru were watching him, and 1 second he was 50 meters or so away and then the next he was in front of Sasuke. There was like a weird orangish red flash of light while he was running too. Hearing all this, both Sarutobi and Kakashi looked at each other, both having a single thought. Hirishin, coughing into his hand, the aged leader nodded before saying, "Thank you for your reports. Team 7, except Kakashi, is hereby dismissed." Kakashi looked to his students as they turned and smiled. Day off for recovery tomorrow, but meet at the usual meeting place at 7 after that. All 3 genin nodded before they walked out, all having something to think about, some more than others, and all wondering what was with Uzumaki Naruto. As soon as they left, Sarutobi looked to Naruto and asked, "Naruto-kun, do you know exactly what you might have done?" The civilian not yet shinobi blinked and looked down in thought, having this, along with other things resting on his head for a while. "Actually, that fight confused the hell out of me." The Hokage winced at the blonde's vocabulary. "I remember defeating Dog Breath, and then the mist started clearing and I saw Haku-chan in trouble. I started running, not really expecting to get there in time when I was suddenly in front of some big cage with a piece of paper on it." The Hokage and Kakashi shared another look, hoping this was something in Naruto's imagination, but deep down knowing it had to do with the seal. Any hopes it wasn't were shattered when Naruto continued. "Then there was some big furball behind the cage who called itself Kyuubi. It said we were in my mind or something and that I should respect it. I told it to go to hell and it said it unlocked some bloodline limit called the Hirami or something. The next thing I know I felt a pull and things kind of slowed and I was in front of Duck Butt." Through his story, the Haku, Zabuza, and Jace were blinking in surprise at this new information. All were having mixed reactions but none were showing it. Sarutobi simply sighed and made a few seals, keeping sound from leaking out of the room due to well-placed seals. "What I'm about to tell you all is a double S-class secret. Naruto-kun, how shall I put it?" Sarutobi pondered. "The brought's a demon container to the Kyuubi, isn't he?" a gruff voice asked, as Zabuza pieced things together. Slowly they were all falling into place, the brat's reserves, his unnatural healing, and his freakish stamina. Now that it was right in front of him it all made sense. "I'm a demon?" Naruto asked, his eyes glazed as he remembered the shouts directed at him before he had escaped this place. His musings were cut short as a fist sent his face plowing into the wood boards of the floor. Looking up about to yell at the person who hit him, he saw a pissed Zabuza. "You're a brat, you're no more demon than I am." Zabuza growled, before turning his glare to Jace who simply said, "So says the demon of the bloody mist." Dodging from a battalion of Senbon needles, Jace hid behind the chair of the Hokage. Yield, yield. The shrimp's fine, just a container, got it." Haku placed a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder and he looked up, blinking in wonder at her caring eyes staring at him. "It's like our conversation on returning to Konoha a while back. Regardless of if Konoha hates you still or not, if you're a demon or not, you have us now, and together we'll all show people our worth, right?" Slowly a smile formed onto the lips of Uzumaki Naruto, before turning into a full-blown grin as he nodded quickly. "You're right, Haku-chan. I'll prove my worth to everyone, as Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage." Sarutobi smiled briefly before looking to Kakashi and clearing his throat. "Yes, you are the container, Naruto-kun, but that simply means you are the jailer keeping the Kyuubi inside the seal the Yondaime put on you. There is another thing though, completing as to why this is a double S-rank secret instead of a single S-class. Your biological father, he's the one who perfected the move you used to an art form. He was known by most as the Yellow Flash, Namikaze Minato." Naruto turned, giving the old man a dumbstruck look. My father. You're saying my dad was the 4th Hokage? Hell yeah. Take that, I'm Konoha royalty bitches. Naruto proceeded to continue to shout obscenities accompanied by proclamations of being the best, all while doing a terrifying and disturbing victory dance around the room. He was stopped by a loud cough, gaining his attention. If you're quite finished. An amused and slightly irritated Sarutobi let out, walking to a portrait of the 4th on the wall. With a burst of his chakra and a handseal no one in the room recognized, the portrait slid open revealing a blade and scroll. These items were supposed to be given to you when you reached the rank of Chunin, but I can make an exception, on one condition. Naruto was in front of the man in an instant. Anything, give me. The Uzumaki said, reaching for the items held out of his reach and currently damning his size. The Hokage smirked. You, along with your group, are to become shinobi of Konoha. We already know this, give me already. The Hokage's smirk grew as he finished. You, Haku, and Jace are to be genin under Zabuza and form your own team. You must also have a more difficult test to gain your ranking, seeing as how regardless you'll be shinobi. Bring on the challenge, old man. Wait, did you just say we have to be genin? Not only that, but the airhead is on our team too. He yelled, pointing at a pouting Jace. Come on, we're Chunin at least. We can't freaking whoop the asses of all the genin in Konoha at once. Sarutobi grinned evilly. Then that is the test. If you can take on the combined efforts of the genin teams in Konoha, you're free to go straight to Chunin, still under Zabuza. If you fail, then you're genin and are stuck on D-rank missions for a month. Before Zabuza or Jace could object, Naruto shouted deal, not knowing the hell of D-rank missions. The two shook on it before saying, then you are dismissed, your test begins tomorrow morning, you're responsible for gathering the teams in this formal spar. Now Kakashi, please show them to their lodgings. Kakashi simply gave the old man a look of confusion, having sat through the whole meeting with one ear on the conversations while his good eye was on his reading material. The old man gave him a knowing look and shifted his eyes to the confidential information left by his now deceased successor, and Kakashi's eyes widened. You don't mean? I do indeed. I believe there is a seal keeping the estate in its stasis shape. Stasis wa? Naruto asked, now catching onto the conversation. He means keeping it like it was before the seal was placed on it. Come on, I'll show you to your new home. Kakashi quickly left by Shushin, Zabuza, Haku, and Jace following as Naruto blinked and then growled. God damn it. Someone needs to teach me that damn technique. As he followed their signatures, jumping out the window. Naruto managed to get halfway to the location he was supposed to go, before the villagers caught on to who he was. Apparently news traveled faster than his running pace, and soon the hateful glares of his past were once more directed at him. To the blonde they somehow had gotten colder. Shivering, Naruto shook his head and concentrated on running. He couldn't think about these damn villagers with 20-foot sticks shoved up their asses. Rounding a corner, he slammed straight into a thing from his worst nightmare, a mob. Suddenly he was in the center of it, and then before he could react he was being stabbed in 3 places at once. Growling, he was about to try and fight back when his limbs locked up and he hit the floor. A paralysis poison. A strong one too for it to affect him. It would take 3 minutes before he could move again, what usually took most people 5 hours, but for those 3 minutes he was left to their mercy, and unsurprisingly they weren't big on showing mercy at the moment. A minute passed, with things being screamed at him and various fluids being poured on, half of which he really didn't want to identify, before something happened. Everything suddenly stopped. The reason was a mist covering the area and a voice coming from all directions. You're all dead. In seconds screaming began as people were cut down where they stood. Some people thought to get away, when Senbon stuck into various and often deadly places, though some were just to cause as much physical pain as possible. Suddenly Naruto found himself lifted and being carried off. That answers my question. The blonde muttered through the poison as the group was finished off, civilians and shinobi alike. Suddenly the mist cleared as Anbu appeared and zeroed in on Zabuza. For the murder of Konoha civilians and shinobi, you're to be executed. Suddenly another figure appeared, taking the form of one pissed off Sarutobi. 5 minutes. 5 minutes he's out of my office and already he's attacked and you Anbu are near useless. All of you are sentenced to D-rank missions and a suspension of your Anbu license. But Hokage-sama. No, Clean up this mess or you will be the ones executed. That is an order. Turning to the group from Kiri, Sarutobi quickly motioned for them to follow him as he took them far out to the border of Konoha. Turning to a now moving Naruto, who was looking at his new clothes with a frown, the third sighed and said, I am so sorry Naruto-kun. Looking up, the blonde shook his head. No problem Ji-san, I kind of expected this. Let's just see my new house. Nodding, Sarutobi moved to the gate and motioned Naruto forward as well. I'm about to unseal the barrier around this place. When I do, place your blood on the spiral on the gate. Blinking, Naruto nodded and as soon as the barrier was up, bit his thumb and dropped some blood on it. Suddenly the gates sprung open and revealed a pathway to an estate bigger than he had ever seen. Eyes widened in wonder, the blonde moved forward and asked the aged leader. This is. Hi Naruto-kun, this is the Namikaze estate. Welcome home Naruto. Chapter 5. Naruto had decided one thing, his house was freaking awesome. It was made up of two one-story houses with a quadrillion rooms, really 20, but to someone who has never owned a permanent house that's a lot, that both connected to a large 3-story house which the old man had called the main house. It had a dojo, hot springs, rive, and a huge backyard that connected with the Land of Fire's very large forest. That was without going into any details. Really all he had explored was the main house, but still, from that it was awesome. In the main house he had a library that started on the first floor and ended on the second. The first floor had a large kitchen, big sitting room, and the entrance to the library. The basement was what seemed to be an office, connected to a testing area of some sorts. Maybe a private dojo, Naruto didn't check really, excited to move on to the next area. The second floor had 4 rooms, and 2 bathrooms. Each room was completely furnished, and Naruto had paused at the second floor. The last room had him on the brink of tears. Excitedly Naruto had ran up the stairs after getting glances at the first floor. More detailed search could be seen later. Right now he needed to know how cool his new home was. Quickly he went through the first door, coming out into the library again. Shutting that door he ran to the next door and found a room that was large, chair in the corner with drawers against a wall and a nice comfy looking bed. Thinking about it he realized he was slightly tired, not physically but mentally from the day's events, but pushed it away in favor of searching. When he finished searching he could sleep. Leaving that room Naruto checked 2 more rooms, seeing much of the same when he opened the final door. As soon as he did he froze. The room was painted blue, a tiny cradle was situated in the corner. It was littered with toys and the closet was slightly open, showing various baby outfits inside. Pictures lined the walls of the room, showing various people. Mostly blondes, and pictures taken from what seemed to be another place altogether. Pictures of the Namikaze complex with people smiling, laughing and waving at the camera, all of them blonde. The other village pictures had red-haired people. Much the same as in the pictures of the Namikaze complex, all of them were laughing and smiling, some showing a few fights, but from their eyes you could tell they were happy. Family, the blonde slowly realized as he looked around at all the pictures. These were pictures of his family, both on his mother's and father's side. Closing his eyes briefly, the Namikaze heir shook his head, refusing to cry. His efforts for to nod as he looked at the banner crossing the room. Painted in big orange lettering were the words, "Welcome home, Naruto." With that last item the blonde's knees hit the ground and he started crying, knowing truly he was home, knowing he had family who loved him and cared for him, and also realizing at the same time that he wouldn't have the chance to know any of them. After a few minutes the blonde sniffed and wiped his eyes, finally noticing people behind him. Turning he smiled at Zabuza, Haku, Kakashi, and the third. He immediately felt stupid. He knew what family was like. All of them loved him. Well, he wasn't sure about Kakashi, but the man seemed to generally care about his well-being. Zabuza was like a father, a rather rough one but a father nonetheless, while Sarutobi was definitely a surrogate grandfather. Haku, he wasn't sure if he felt that she was a sister or not, but she was very precious to him. Smiling at all 4 of them he waved off their looks and said, "I'll be fine. I'm gonna check the 3rd floor." Zabuza nodded slightly and opened the door to the room next to him. "You go ahead Gaki, I'm staying down here. I kind of like this room, good view of the river." Haku smiled encouragingly at him and walked up, hugging him briefly. "Yes, I believe I'll take a room down here as well, I am rather tired after all." She walked into the room across the hall from Zabuza. Kakashi gave a slight eye smile and said, I just remembered I left my stove on. This caused both the Hokage and Naruto to sweat drop as the man left via Shushin. The Hokage gave Naruto a smile and patted his back. I have some more paperwork to finish, the old man turned, leaving. Cursing the bane of his existence. Naruto smiled slightly, understanding the message under all of it. They were letting him see his parents' room alone. Silently thanking them all, the young Namikaze Uzumaki walked up the stairs, pausing at the door at the top. Naruto opened the door slowly, taking his first step into his parents' room. Letting out a slow breath, he looked around the room, taking it all in. The whole third floor was his parents' bedroom. Walking slowly in, he slid his hand across the two dressers, a mirror hanging over the top of both of them. Next to the dressers on the walls were photos, a picture of a blonde man happily hugging a laughing red-haired lady, knowing immediately it was his mother and father. Smiling, he moved on, looking at a picture of his father and a young Kakashi flanked by a black-haired boy and a brown-haired girl. Keeping on walking, Naruto found a desk in the corner, still littered with papers, some official-looking while others were what seemed to be notes on some kind of seal or something else, much too complicated for him to understand. On the back desk was a circled date, October 10th. A soft smile formed on the loudmouth's face as he circled the date as well with his finger. On the desk was a black book, in gold lettering it was labeled journal. Blinking at it, Naruto started to reach for it, before thinking better of it and walking on. That was private, he would leave his father his own privacy, no matter how much he wanted to know about the man. That, and he was fearful to know his father for some reason, some sort of twist in his mind felt that the man should remain the god he built in his mind. Not the human he knew he would find in those pages. Walking on, the Uzumaki found himself before a window shining with the setting sunlight, a beautiful view over the forest where the sun was setting on the horizon. Walking past the window, he found himself in front of twin closets, one filled with clothing for a female, obviously his mother's. The other being his father's. Inside were Junin vests, black shirts, and two matching sets of cloaks, one saying "Fourth" in kanji, the other labeled Yellow Flash. Beside the two was a headband with the Konoha insignia. Smiling, the blonde grabbed it and gently held it up to his chest. Walking to the king-sized bed situated across from the twin dressers, Naruto sat down and looked around. On the other side of the bed was a door that doubtless went to a bathroom or something of that sort, but Naruto would check those out later. For now, he just wanted to rest, in wonder that in one day he had found his family, and he had found his true home. Softly Naruto closed his eyes, falling easily asleep with a small, soft smile on his face. Maybe things in Konoha wouldn't be so bad. Happy dreams were dissolved when a bucket of cold water hit him, courtesy of his new, yet old sensei. What the hell, you bastard? You soaked my parents' bed. Zabuza smirked and muttered. Kai, immediately the water that was previously soaking the Uzumaki was gone. Gaki, you suck ass at genjutsu. Now get up and get ready, we have ass to kick. Naruto blinked in confusion for a moment before grinning, remembering. Oh hell yeah. So, did you issue the challenges? Zabuza smirked. Nah, you guys are gonna do that. Naruto simply blinked. What? And it was there that Zabuza's plan to get the fight started took place as he explained it to the new Konoha shinobi, an evil grin spreading across both of their faces. It was an average training session with Team 9. Lee was shouting about youth and punching the air as they waited for their sensei. Neji was leaning against a tree, shaking his head at the failure Lee was, and Tenten was practicing her throw, again, while waiting. Suddenly things took a turn for the abnormal as a black and white-haired teen suddenly appeared and caught on of the kunai Tenten threw by the hilt. He seemed to look at it and then around his surroundings. He then turned to the bun-haired girl and asked, "Isn't it dangerous to throw weapons around the mentally handicapped and the blind?" Motioning his head, he indicated Neji and Lee. The team all stared in shock as the teen just showed up and insulted two of them in one go. By the way, shouldn't you be more worried about your nails? I mean, Kunoichi can't honestly be taken seriously. Make that 3. Honestly, he lied about the last part, but he had to do this for the plan. Immediately he was ducking, squatting down as 2 fingers passed where his head was previously. Letting out a low whistle as he looked up at Neji, he said. For a blind dude, you're pretty fast. Sucks about being blind, must be why you got stuck with the weapon user wannabe and the defective green guy. Immediately he was dodging a roundhouse kick and kunai, shuriken, and many other pointy objects. Well, I was just coming to check out the other teams, glad we have nothing to worry about from the Special Olympic team. Hey, the three of you put together would make a functioning team member. Laughing, the swordsman ran, Team 9 on his heels. Part 1 of the operation was complete. Haku arrived in front of an odd team, put together of a timid-looking girl with pale eyes, a teen wearing shades that looked incredibly intimidating, Go Shino, favorite character folks, sorry about that, and a black-haired boy who just looked fake for some reason. Taking a deep breath, she hated doing this, but Naruto and Zabuza were counting on her. She stepped forward. Hey, you guys look weak, she shouted, though it came out fumbling. It managed to catch the team's attention as they all looked at her, breaking from the watching for their sensei. Your sunglasses are horrible. Haku winced at the insult. It was horrible. Oh, why did she have to do this? This wasn't her style. The fake-looking teen smiled, which creeped Haku out, and replied, that's not a good insult. A good insult would be saying that kimono you're wearing looks so horrendous I want to puke on it to make it look better. Haku twitched and gritted her teeth. She liked this kimono. Well, you're a stupid jerk. All that got was the sunglasses-wearing boy raising an eyebrow, and she sighed in defeat. I'm supposed to provoke you into fighting. I'm not good at it. We're having a genin test and we need help from all the genin teams. So could you possibly follow me and look like you're angry? Sai looked to his two teammates. Hinata poked her fingers and said, I guess we could. Shino simply nodded and Sai turned and said, sure, start running. Haku smiled and bowed. Arigato. After that she started running, the team following her and trying to look like they were angry. Team 7 blinked as they all met up again on the bridge. Sakura was the first to voice her complaint as Sasuke leaned against the railing and Kiba played with Akamaru in the middle of it. How come we have to meet up again today? Sensei said we had today off, didn't he? You're here because my brats kicked your asses so hard last time you all fought, and now they're gonna do it again, plus with every other genin backing you up. A voice right behind her said, making her let out a slight scream as she jumped and turned in one movement. Sasuke and Kiba both twitched and Zabuza waved his hand. Follow me for your destruction. With that he started moving, though keeping it slow for his max speed so the brats could keep up. Team 10 stood under a large tree, Ino leaning against it as Shikamaru slept underneath and Choji simply ate. All was peaceful until a loud voice erupted from the bottom of the hill. Oi, fatso. How about you and your bimbo friend come and catch me, if you can move, that is. A blonde from the bottom of the hill yelled, a Konoha headband strapped to his forehead. Immediately Choji grew furious. I'm big boned. Ino grew equally angry at the comment towards her and grabbed Shikamaru by the shirt. Come on you bum, we got a lesson to teach. TCH, troublesome. The Nara muttered as he was dragged behind his two friends as they gave chase to the blonde running from them. In a large open training ground is where all the team met. 6 of them immediately trying to kill their targets for the first few seconds before noticing the other genin. They all paused for a few moments, and in that time the only adult, Zabuza, took center stage. Alright, you 12 are gonna help me with my genin test. My 3 say they can take down all the genin in Konoha put together, and you're here to prove them wrong. If you do, they stay genin, if you don't, then they're chunin and immediately your superiors. Zabuza smirked. Divide yourself however you like, no hold barred and anything allowed. Go. Immediately Jace snorted. Ooh, scary. 4 of them are kunoichi anyway. A slight twitch in his hand that only Neji and Hinata caught told his lie, but everyone else witnessed the women start to grow in anger. I mean, I can probably beat them all with one hand tied behind my back. Immediately he was surrounded on 3 sides by pure righteous feminine justice. Hinata was behind him, in a fighting stance but not as angry, mainly confused by his lie. Immediately Jace ducked and dodged many attempts to rip off his family jewels as he moved back, leading them away from the main group. Haku and Naruto both sweat dropped at this, knowing the reason he had lied like that. Zabuza had promised the sword-loving teen a new and better sword that could hold chakra if he lived through the test this way. Personally they both knew this was suicide, but Jace was always on board when it came to a new sword, or anything sword-related really. Shaking their head, Naruto strode forward and smirked. Let's see. Ooh, I wanna get Duckbutt, the creepy-looking black-haired guy with the too tight shirt, the fat kid, and… ooh. I always wanted to fight a blind kid. Neji twitched and his stoic mask was broken as he flung himself forward. I'm not blind. His roar was echoed by, I'm not fat. And off he was, dodging extra-large hands and feet, chakra-filled fingers, some weird ink-light things, and fireballs. The whole time he was laughing like a kid in a candy store. Haku had Senbon in each hand, smiling. Well then, that leaves me with you four. I apologize for any injuries you may get ahead of time. Her eyes widened as the kid in green spandex appeared before her, bowing. I apologize as well, now let's begin. And Haku's fight started by being blown through the air by a very strong punch, straight into one of her mirrors as a dome appeared around all of them. Jace was seriously doubting his own sanity as he realized how bad he had put himself in the hole. 3 very angry females were not good opponents, especially when one of them had very accurate throws and was aiming all her pointy objects at your unmentionables. Actually, where was she getting all of these weapons? It would be physically impossible to carry those with the way she was dressed. So far he hadn't been able to fight back at all, every ounce of his will put into keeping his boys intact. Now he was starting to sweat. Suddenly he couldn't feel the bottom of his right leg, and looking down he saw 2 fingers pressed into his leg by the only non-angry female. She must have seen through his lie and was clear-headed enough to plan. She had cut off his retreat, and now he couldn't retreat. Standing on one leg, Jace unsheathed his blades and started blocking kunai, shuriken. Was that a kitchen sink? Look, I was told to say that by sensei. I really believe kunoichi are just as good as male shinobi. Mercy. Suddenly the 3 stopped and gave very evil smirks. Oh, we'll show mercy. As soon as you give us those swords of yours to decorate. Jace's eyes grew wide and he narrowed his eyes, pointing his blades at them. I'll never surrender my precious blades. Fight to the death. With that he jumped at them, hopping on one leg to be beat into the ground horribly by the 3 kunoichi, honorably taking his beating from them as any man should when he ticks off a member of the female race. Jace had failed his part. Now it was up to Haku and Naruto to keep them in the Chunin running. So, picking out 2 rookies of the year, an unknown factor, and an Akamichi with a sensitive weight issue was a tad on the insane side. Still, the Namikaze heir could definitely say he was having an amazing time in this fight. Flipping over another enlarged fist, the Uzumaki blocked a charging pure black lion that seemed to be made of ink that had been charging down said dodged limb with one of his now separated blades. Using the force of the lion's jump he pushed himself back farther, sending a kick straight into the Uchiha's face as he prepared to fire another fireball at him. Naruto grinned as the raven-haired shinobi started hacking up smoke. Unfortunately he didn't get to enjoy the view too long as he was dodging a barrage of chakra-enhanced fingers. One touch from those things and it was game over, even for his advanced healing. These 4 would take any sign of weakness apart and leave him in shreds. Knowing this, the swordsman let himself be pushed towards a tree and then proceeded to backflip onto its surface, hoping this would work. Sending chakra into his blade like he would when he powered up his arm for an extra hard punch, he focused on the edge and tried to make it sharp before slicing against the trunk. It worked, but due to it being the first try his blade sunk halfway and stopped. Growling he tried to pull it free, but he wasn't given the chance due to an oversized fist slamming into him due to his moment of being distracted. Holding onto the blade stuck into the tree, the Namikaze kept it in grasp as the whole blasted trunk fell over. Rolling as soon as he hit the ground, he nimbly dodged another, or possibly the same, ink lion as kunai rapidly flew at him. Using one of his blades he quickly blocked the kunai as best he could, one of 2 managing thin slices on him. Suddenly a voice from behind him shouted, "You're in my range of divination." Naruto's eyes widened and quickly he jumped forward, unfortunately not fast enough as quick fingers burst forward, nailing all the tenketsu on his legs. Falling forward, the blonde grit his teeth and made 3 quick hand seals. Mizu Bushin no Jutsu. 2 water clones immediately popped up from the water vapor in the air, leaving the blonde panting. Even with his reserves, manipulation with that little water was hard. Immediately the 2 Bushin went on the assault with their blades, slicing at the 4 and making them retreat a bit, trying to buy the original time to recover. Unfortunately for them, the Uchiha with his now active Sharingan easily took on of them out and rushed forward, two kunai in hand. Naruto had only one leg painfully unsealed, due to him pushing as much chakra as he could through the blocked tenketsu. Quickly he tried to knock the Uchiha's legs out from under him. The Avenger dodged easily with a jump, exactly what Naruto was hoping for. Naruto shoved one of his swords forward and watched as the surprised Sasuke blocked, being pushed backwards through the air. Using one hand, the blonde pushed himself backwards into a roll and used his good leg to flip himself up, barely dodging a meaty fist impacting the ground, causing a crater. Suddenly a kunai was placed at the base of his spine upon landing, along with a glowing palm before his chest. Naruto summed up his feelings in one word. Damn it. Now it was all up to Haku to save the team from the sufferings of D-rank missions. Haku was on the ropes. Her speed was accounting for nothing, since the strange green-wearing shinobi was matching her step for step after he took off his apparent training weights, to which they were amazing in weight if those craters were anything to go by. Not only could he follow her, but so could the boy wearing sunglasses, though how Haku didn't know. The Inuzuka and the other pineapple-headed boy were in the back behind the two. The pineapple-wearing one was talking to the group in low tones, apparently formulating some kind of plan while the green one kept her out of hearing range. Finally she had enough and threw some senbon at the boy's legs, hoping to take some of his speed down. Deftly he dodged it and seemed to smile more. This whole battle he had that creepy smile on his face, like this was all fun. Finally their planning session seemed to end as the other three started moving. She rushed out of the mirror, past the green one who was on her heels, towards a better mirror when suddenly a massive black cloud got in the way of said mirror. Knowing that wasn't good news, Haku switched direction when she had to nimbly roll to dodge twin drills. Suddenly the green-clad boy was in front of her, smiling bigger than ever as he brought his arm back. Haku barely had enough time to cross her arms as the boy's fist smashed into her feeble defense, sending her flying backwards and tumbling across the ground. As she rolled to her feet, suddenly she was stuck, her arms moving of their own accord into a circular position. A voice in front of her said, "Shadow possession is a success." Looking down she blinked in surprise to see her shadow connected to his. So the boy was a Nara, she should have known. Suddenly she was surrounded by a buzzing black cloud. Looking around she noticed that it wasn't just a cloud, but a cloud of insects. A monotone voice cut through the buzzing to reach her. "You best surrender, or my kekai will drain your chakra until it is impossible for you to move." Looking down in shame for her defeat, Haku sighed. "I surrender." And now it was official, the team was doomed to a month of D-rank missions. Back in the general meeting area, everyone gathered before Zabuza, Naruto and Haku both standing, while the girls dumped a barely conscious Jace on the ground, looking a lot like minced meat. Zabuza observed the scene before him, and started laughing. "I knew you brats bit off more than you could chew. Anyway, all I need is blonde Gaki, the rest of you can go and do what you please." With that he grabbed a hold of Naruto and vanished in a puff of smoke. Slowly everyone began to disperse, leaving only two figures left on the training field. One with her hair in buns and the other still looking like mincemeat, but in a sitting position. Slowly the pile of mincemeat said, "Why are you still here, and staring at me? I wanna see your swords," she said, leaning forward to try and get a look at them. "No," Jace said protectively moving backwards with them. "Show me them," Tenten replied, moving forward, still trying to see them. Jace hugged his swords for dear life and yelled, "Why do you wanna see my precious swords? 'Cause swords are so amazing. I especially like katanas." Tenten started off, beginning a rant on how awesome swords were. "Wait, you like swords?" Jace said in surprise, cutting her off mid-rant. "Of course, they are some of the best close-ranged weapons to have," Tenten said, as if in shock he would have to ask. Very reluctantly Jace moved one of his blades out. "Just don't scratch it or anything." And thus a friendship began between two weapons freaks. Naruto and Zabuza appeared before the Hokage, who was simply smirking. "Chunin rank, Naruto-kun. Screw you old man," Naruto yelled, pouting childishly as he turned his head away. The Hokage simply laughed and pulled the scroll and sword out once more. "Naruto-kun, there was two things in that test. One, to show you that big words can lead to a hard fall, and two, that even the best of shinobi, when met with teamwork, can fall. You'll still get these." Naruto blinked thoughtfully and then nodded, pondering this before grinning and reaching for the items impatiently. The aged man chuckled and handed them over. Just to let you know, not even I know what's in those scrolls. He'd place a blood seal on it. So how do I open it? Naruto whined, thinking that only the Yondaime could open it now due to him having the only blood needed. Sarutobi rolled his eyes. Simply prick your finger, he was your father Naruto-kun. Right. Taking a deep breath, the blonde pricked his finger and watched the drop of blood slowly drop down and hit the scroll. The scroll glowed yellow briefly before opening slightly, unsealed for all its contents to be read. If you enjoyed this naruhaku twist, remember to like, share, and subscribe to Fox Fan Fiction for more epic Naruto stories.